Welcome to, frankly, a somewhat depressing exploration of what can only be described as questionable decisions, shall we say, made in Montgomery, because today we're diving headfirst into the cesspool of Montgomery's biggest blunders. We're talking about the kind of mistakes that make you slap your forehead and say, who approved this plan? A raccoon wearing a blindfold? Over the next few minutes, we'll be dissecting the top 5 blunders that have left Montgomery residents shaking their heads in disbelief. From baffling urban planning choices to financial decisions that would make a drunken gambler blush, we're holding nothing back. This isn't just about pointing fingers, though. It's about understanding how these mistakes happened, and more importantly, how we can avoid repeating them in the future. So buckle up, grab your skepticism hats, and let's get into it. Because trust me, you're going to need both. Let's be clear, urban planning is important. It's the difference between a thriving metropolis and, well, a place where you need a machete to get through the morning commute. Sadly, it seems Montgomery took the machete approach. Exhibit A, the city's traffic. Now, I've experienced traffic jams in my time, but Montgomery's gridlock is less of a traffic jam and more of a traffic congealing. It's like someone poured concrete into the streets during rush hour and said, let's call it a day. And don't even get me started on the lack of green spaces. We're talking about a city centre that's basically a concrete jungle with a pollen allergy. Where are the parks? The trees, the places where people can actually breathe without inhaling exhaust fumes. Look, I'm not saying urban planning is easy, but I am saying that a city designed by a sentient GPS system would probably have fewer issues. Montgomery's urban planning isn't just bad. It's tragically comical. It's like someone handed a toddler a city planning simulator and said, "Go wild, kid!" And the toddler, bless their heart, decided that wild meant designing a city for cars, not people. The result? A sprawling mess of concrete and asphalt, where pedestrians risk life and limb just trying to cross the street. It's enough to make you want to scream into the void, where are the crosswalks? Where are the bike lanes? Where is the basic common sense? But hey, at least we can all bond over our shared misery as we sit in traffic, breathing in each other's exhaust fumes. That's something, right? Now let's talk about everyone's favorite topic, money. Or in Montgomery's case, the lack thereof. Because when it comes to managing its budget, Montgomery makes a drunken sailor on shore leave look like a financial genius. We're talking about the kind of financial mismanagement that would make even the most jaded accountant weep. Remember that time they spent $1 bajillion on a giant, useless statue of a squirrel holding a traffic cone? No, well, that's because it didn't actually happen. But I wouldn't be surprised if it did, considering the kind of questionable financial decisions this city has made. Potholes the size of small cars? Sure. A fully funded public library system? Don't be ridiculous. Look, I'm not an economist, but I can tell you that when you consistently spend more than you earn, things tend to go south pretty quickly. And in Montgomery's case, south is starting to look a lot like a dystopian wasteland where potholes outnumber citizens. The really frustrating thing is that this isn't rocket science. It's basic budgeting 101. Don't spend money you don't have. It's a simple concept, but one that seems to have eluded the fine folks in charge of Montgomery's finances. And the worst part? It's the citizens who suffer the consequences. Crumbling infrastructure, inadequate public services, and a general sense that the city is slowly but surely circling the drain. These are the hallmarks of Montgomery's budgetary incompetence. So, the next time you find yourself dodging potholes the size of lunar craters, remember, this is what happens when a city treats its budget like a game of Monopoly played by someone who doesn't understand the concept of money. Chapter 3F for failing. The state of Montgomery's education system. Now, let's talk about the kids, because the children are our future. Unless, of course, they're being educated in Montgomery, in which case the future is looking bleak indeed. Look, I'm not saying that all teachers in Montgomery are bad. In fact, I'm sure there are many dedicated educators working tirelessly to overcome the systemic challenges they face. But the sad reality is that the education system in this city is about as stable as a Jenga tower built by a caffeinated squirrel. Class sizes are ballooning faster than a clown making balloon animals at a child's birthday party. Textbooks are so outdated they still mention the Soviet Union. And don't even get me started on the lack of funding for basic necessities like pencils, paper, and, a roof that doesn't leak when it rains. It's gotten so bad that even the rats are starting to think twice about enrolling their offspring in Montgomery's public schools. And frankly, who can blame them? The fact is, a quality education is the foundation of a thriving society. But in Montgomery, that foundation is cracking faster than a sidewalk during an earthquake. And until the city gets serious about investing in its children's future, the future is going to be looking pretty grim. So, the next time you hear someone say, "The children are our future," I want you to remember this. In Montgomery, that statement is starting to sound less like a hopeful promise and more like a dire warning. Chapter 4, The Lorax Would Not Approve, Montgomery's Environmental Neglect. Let's be honest, folks, Mother Nature deserves better than this, she really does. But if Montgomery were a person, it would be the kind of person who chucks their empty soda cans out the car window, then reverses to run them over again. Just for kicks. We're talking about a level of environmental neglect that would make even the most ardent climate change denier say, okay, maybe we went a little too far. Remember that time they decided to build a landfill right next to a nature preserve? No, because I made it up. But again, not entirely unbelievable, is it? Because this is a city where the air quality is about as healthy as smoking a pack of cigarettes while jogging through a dumpster fire. Look, I get it. Environmental protection can be expensive, but you know what's even more expensive? Dealing with the consequences of environmental neglect. Think extreme weather events, rising sea levels, and an entire generation growing up thinking that breathing through a gas mask is just a normal part of life. Montgomery's approach to the environment seems to be, what's the worst that could happen? Well, I'll tell you what's the worst that could happen. We end up living in a world where the only trees left are the plastic ones they put up in shopping malls during the holidays. So the next time you see someone littering in Montgomery, don't just shake your head in disapproval. Hand them a copy of the Lorax and tell them to educate themselves, because at this rate we're all going to need a sniffing, truffle, tree-hugging hero to save us from ourselves. Chapter 5. Public Health or Public Hazard? Montgomery's Oversights. And finally, let's talk about something near and dear to all our hearts, our health. Because when it comes to public health, Montgomery seems to have taken a page from the "let's see what happens" playbook. Spoiler alert, nothing good. We're talking about a city where the wait times at the public health clinic are longer than the lines for the bathroom at a Taylor Swift concert. A city where the response to a public health crisis is about as effective as a screen door on a submarine. Look, I'm not a doctor, but I do know that ignoring public health concerns is a bit like ignoring a ticking time bomb. It might seem fine for a while, but eventually that bomb is going to go off and the fallout is going to be messy. And in Montgomery, that fallout is already starting to show. From rising rates of preventable diseases to a general lack of access to affordable health care, the consequences of neglecting public health are becoming impossible to ignore. The sad truth is, a healthy population is the backbone of a thriving society. But in Montgomery, that backbone is starting to look a bit like a rubber chicken, flimsy, bendy, and not particularly appetizing. So the next time you find yourself waiting in line for hours at the public health clinic, remember, this is what happens when a city treats its citizens' well-being like an optional extra rather than a fundamental necessity. Well, there you have it, folks. Montgomery's top 5 blunders laid bare for all to see. It's not a pretty picture, is it? But hey, at least we can take comfort in the fact that we're all in this together, right? Look, I'm not saying that Montgomery is beyond saving, but it's going to take a lot of work, a lot of accountability, and a whole lot of listening to the people who actually live here. Because if there's one thing we've learned from all of this, it's that ignoring problems doesn't make them go away. In fact, it usually just makes them worse. So let's all try to do better, Montgomery, for our sake, for our children's sake, and for the sake of all the poor, unsuspecting souls who might stumble into this city thinking it's a good idea to stay.